Did you ever notice that the Shichibukai, the 7 warlords of the sea, represent the 7 deadly sins, and that the Strawhats also kind of represent the 7 deadly sins? It's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it, but let's just get right into it. Start with the obvious. Boy Hancock represents lust, Crocodile represents greed, and Doflamingo represents pride. I think we can all agree that that's very much their characteristic, their attributes, their personality, or how they are perceived, or what they put out in the world, right? The next couple ones though, I need to give a little bit more context. So Jinbei, if we're going by the original 7 Warlords of the Sea, represents envy, in that he represents the envy that all fishmen have towards humans and their privileged life on the surface world. Moria represents the glutton. Now, this one's a bit tricky because he could also be greed, and that no, he wants to have as many shadows as possible. But you could always say that gluttony is just food greed, and Moria really, he consumes the shadows, he absorbs them and grows bigger. So that's not a material greed of gain like Crocodile has. In that case, it becomes a more gluttonous greed that, you know, affects his own body, his growth by consuming them. So I would say yes, you can really make the case for him representing the deadly sin of gluttony. And the next one requires a little bit of explanation as well. Kuma is the sloth. But before you freak out and say Kuma is not a sloth, what are you talking about, Brief? That's not true. Well, back in the 4th century, the 7 deadly sins were the same, but sloth was actually acedia. And acedia in ancient Greece is described as a state of apathy, of not caring about the world or one's place in the world, or letting the world do whatever they want to and just saying, okay, I'm done with this, do whatever you have to. And Kuma, becoming a mindless robot to be controlled and reproduced, actually represents that perfectly. The reason behind it, we don't know. The reason behind it is probably that he cares a lot and he's following, you know, an ideology with this, and he wants to achieve something by doing so. But the effect is that he, in a state of acedia, in a state of apathy, lets them do whatever they want. So it actually fits beautifully that Kuma is acedia, aka sloth. And if you've been keeping count, then that leaves Wrath for Mihawk. And with Mihawk and Wrath, I would say, is he particularly filled with wrath? I don't know, but I think we can definitely make the case that when you face Mihawk, you face his wrath, you face his one-man army that he literally is. Let's not forget that this guy doesn't have a crew, and you face the wrath of his sword and his power. So I think it's not as evident as the others, but it fits well enough. And I think if you specifically consider the other 6, this is not a coincidence. There's too much evidence that these 7 deadly sins fit these 7 warlord personalities so beautifully, like a glove, that the case of Mihawk not fitting perfectly is not enough for me to entirely dispel the idea that Oda might have been inspired by the 7 deadly sins when creating the Shichibukai. And even when you take the replacements into consideration, it still fits. Blackbeard replaces Crocodile, and Blackbeard is greedy. I mean, the guy wants everything and more. And it's even a similar greed as Crocodile is. He wants status, he wants recognition, he wants power, he wants to be the pirate king, and he wants devil fruit. So Blackbeard would stop at nothing to satisfy his greed. And later he is replaced by Buggy the Clown, and Buggy, I mean, Buggy is one of the greediest characters in all of One Piece. So with Buggy, the theme of greed even fits the best. And then if you want to take this a step further, before the Shichibukai are disbanded, Edward Weevil is also one of them, and he was essentially the replacement of Jinbei. So the theme of envy fits Edward Weevil because he's envious of Whitebeard's family, and he proclaims he's Whitebeard's son, but no one sees it, and he's not getting that love, and he's not getting Whitebeard as his father, and he's envious of everybody that receives that love. As for Trafalgar Law, I mean, he was a Shichibukai for the shortest time. I don't see it with him. I mean, he would have replaced, correct me if I'm wrong here, Moria, and that would be gluttony. I don't see him having gluttonous traits. So with Trafalgar Law, it doesn't work. But again, he's a Shichibukai for the shortest time. Now with the Straw Hats, I think it's less obvious, but I'll do my analysis after I give you the traits and the character. Luffy is the glutton, Sanji is lust, Chopper is envy in that he was once envious of humans before he ate his devil fruit, or maybe that was why he ate his devil fruit rather. Zoro is pride, Nico Robin is wrath in that everywhere she goes, or rather everywhere she leaves, disaster follows. You know, it's not necessarily the wrath of Nico Robin, but you can kind of stretch it to fit that. Nami, Greed, I think needs no explanation, and Usopp would be Sloth or Acedia. And here I don't think it fits as well. He's not lazy, but and he also doesn't not care about what happens around him. He's not in a state of apathy. Now, my take on the Straw Hats and the Seven Deadly Sins is that I think the Shichibukai just fit better because with them, the Seven Deadly Sins are really their traits. It's really their place in the world. Either, as I said, how they are perceived or who they are or what their actions represent. And I think with the 7 warlords, it's also no coincidence that there's 7 on them and it just fits them so perfectly. With the Straw Hats, yes, it fits, but it's also that the 7 deadly sins are archetype vices, and you can apply a lot of these vices to a lot of people. I think we all fall into one or several of those 7 deadly sins, and I think that's more what's the case with the Straw Hats, whereas with the Shichibukai, it really is what they are, what they represent. And also, did you know that the 7 warlords system of using pirates and having them enforce the law, that actually existed? So the Shichibukai are definitely based on real history. That's a fascinating story behind that, but that's the video for another day. For now, if you like what I do here, then please do consider hitting that follow button, because I do these mythological, historical backgrounds for anime and manga every day. If you follow, then I'll see you tomorrow. Alright? Alright.